picking it up and putting it in will cause a more random texturing pattern. And you can see what an interesting cut we've got there. Hi y'all, and welcome to my shop. Would you like to add some visual and tactile sensation in just a few moments to your wood turnings, bowls, boxes, platters, what have you? Well, I'm going to show you how to do that using texturing tools in the next few videos. We're going to talk about spiraling and texturing. I'm going to show you how to use a rotary tool known as the Decorating Elf commercially. We're going to show you how to use Wagner tools. First, let's get started by talking a little bit about wood. It's important that in texturing, you generally do best by tight, close-grained wood that doesn't have a lot of necessary feature that might fight the texturing. For example, if you have nice ambrosia maple, probably not something you'd want to texture because nature's already done that work for you. Let's get started. Let me start by comparing and contrasting the large Sorby system and the micro system on the texturing wheel. The texturing wheel has a bevel on both sides and comes to a point on both of these systems. The biggest difference between these two systems is number one, cost. The micro system is less expensive, and secondly, the size. The larger size is generally better for larger type work, larger platters and larger bowls. The smaller system can work for inside smaller areas like box lids and that sort of thing, but generally they'll get the similar results. So generally I would recommend for most people to go with the less expensive system, and that's this one. Keep in mind though that when you buy this system, it's been sold in different configurations. It may or may not come with a texturing wheel. It may come with two spiraling cutters. The other difference is in the bearing. This one has a bearing on it so it spins freely. This one has a bronze bushing that has to have a drop of light machine oil every time you use it, and there's going to be some wear. This one's also used at a slower speed than this. Okay, now that we've compared and contrasted the two different sizes, let's go ahead and get started. There's basically going to be two different patterns you can get from the texturing tool. Texturing tool can do side grain as well as in grain. The speed, as I think I might have mentioned before, generally you want to keep it between about 400 and 600. The distance in your tool rest ought to probably fit 3 fingers for this large one, because you got to have room for it to rest solidly on the bar and still swing freely. Let me back just a bit. So every time it touches, all right, we're going to go in 90 degrees of the wood, and I'm just going to keep pressure on. And then just slowly move it sideways, back and forth. And you see this pattern. I think we can pick that up, and let me use a felt tip pen. I think you can see that pattern a little bit better. That's what I call a orange peel, and with the cutter vertically. If we turn it slightly, well, before I do that, now let's contrast that with using the small one, and we're just going to move this tailstock support a little bit closer, keeping in mind that the tool rest is generally going to be even with the center of the work, and that's the easiest way to measure it with a flat tool. And again, we have room for that cutter, and we're just going to turn it a little bit slower on this tool because it doesn't use bearings. It actually uses bronze bushing. You need to go real slow, no more than 350, or it'll have a tendency to overheat and can cause problem with that bushing. So same thing, we're going to press in. It just moves back and forth. We'll color that. And The pattern is very similar. The only difference is with this particular diameter wood, it falls back in a hole, and it's not quite as random looking, but very, very similar. Now let's turn it a little bit sideways, and generally we move into in the direction of the lower wheel. So in this case, with the lower wheel to my left, we're going to move to the left. I'm going to tilt it slightly, and I'm going to use the bushing down because it'll have a tendency to unwind otherwise. So we're going to just tilt it slightly off center, maybe 10-15 degrees, and move that. And we're going to get a much more aggressive cut. And in this case, it did a fairly nice clean spiral. I'll do a close-up of this here shortly after I put all the patterns on here. And that's just a coincidence because when it came around, it fell to the diameter of this wood is equally divisible by the distance between two teeth, so it fell right back in the same hole. Now if I turn that a little bit more, we'll get a slightly different effect. Whoops, slow the speed down below 350. You have to press quite hard, because this really is they call them cutter, but it's really a scraper. And now in this case it's overlapped some, giving us a slightly different pattern. And let's do it. Turn it, leaving a little more at a distance, and we're going to pick it up. And instead of keeping constant contact with the wood, let's vary the pattern by just picking it up and pressing the wood again. And we're still going to get striations. In this case, not as aggressive as I might have expected. Now we're going to go with the larger wheel, and we're going to do the same thing, turning it at a bit of an angle. Again, moving in the direction to the lower. Generally, most of the time, we'll look toward the lower bevel. In this case, it became a little more aggressive, and this is what I'm talking about it cleaning, chewing up, and can make quite an interesting pattern. And generally you want to get rid of these little frizzies. You can use a brass detail brush with it in motion, but what I find actually works best is these green abrasive non-woven pads. They tend to work real well to get rid of those frizzies. Now let's try this thing on. Let me show you the effect on end grain. And again, with this slightly down, we're going to go first 90 degrees up. And we'll get a close-up of that pattern here in just a minute. And then I'm going to be a little more aggressive by turning the wheel. And again, using color to highlight it. And you can see what an interesting effect we get. Now, anytime we do this type of spiraling or texturing, we want a border, put a border on each side to frame it and make it easier for the eye to get pulled in. So you'll do that at logical breaks. So let me kind of show you what I'm talking about. Get speed up a little bit. I'm using a little small pyramid tool. I showed a video on how to make this in small lathe tools. You can click on the button and link that video if you haven't seen it. But we're going to put one here. Stop the lathe, see where the pattern changed right here. And maybe one right here. And that makes it just a little bit easier to frame it. So those are different effects with the spiraling tool. And this works real well on any number of projects. And as you'll see in the slideshow at the end of this this video, and where some of these things can apply. And while you're having fun and practicing, you could take this, you could part it off and make a refrigerator magnet. So as you practice these pieces, just part them off, make a refrigerator magnet, stick a little hole in it, in the back, drop in a drop of CA, and use a rare earth magnet. Now in this case, I would go ahead and part down a little lower. Let me see if I can find an example one. With a look a little more like this to make it easier to get your fingers behind it to get it off the refrigerator. Okay, we're going to switch now to a what I call perpendicular grain. I picked that terminology up from somebody else. So if it's spindle orientation, it's parallel grain. If it's like a bowl, we're going to call it perpendicular grain. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to, I've got this surface nice and clean for texturing. It pays to go ahead and sand it up to the probably 240 or 320 before you texture, except for this demo. You want to do what I call a pencil test. Is bring that pencil up and don't press hard, but just touch the surface and see if you get it all the way around. In this case, we're getting some skip, which means by me remounting it, it's not true. So I've got to clean up that surface with another pass, and the easiest way for me to do that is probably with this shear scraper. So I'm just lift this up. Slow it down. Let's see how it does. Also pays when you're texturing, figure out where that band's going to be and kind of mark it. I'm still getting skip, so let me resort to a small bowl gouge to make sure we got that cleaned up. Now we'll follow that up with a scraper for the cleanest surface we can get without having to sand it. The reason to sand it primarily is so you can sand the areas on both sides of the where it's going to be textured, because it may be difficult for you to get in there with sandpaper after you texture. But you do want a nice clean surface. Alright, we're going to use a small texturing wheel. I'm just going to show you that you can use that on a bowl. It's not limited to tiny boxes. Again, the speed is below 350. And let's do the pencil test again. Let's go ahead and mark those bands. We're going to put a band here, and we're going to put a band here. Back that off a little bit. And it looks like it touched all the way around. So we're in good shape. Get that speed down below 350. Alright, in this case we're going to start again 90 degrees to the wood in almost every case with texturing tools. Be able to put the pressure on it and keep it under control. And I'm going to just tilt it slightly, just only a slight degree, and then I'm just going to pull it across between those bands and lift it a few times. So I know I'll get a somewhat broken surface. And I think you can see that texture. We've got a very nice nice surface. And then again, as before, we're always going to punch this up a little bit by delineating where that texturing is to make it really pop. And I'll come right in on top of that pencil line, make the pencil go away. Another way to do that, additionally, you could use a burn wire on some turnings. But a thin strip of exotic wood that's been run on your belt sander, so you've got a nice, I think y'all can see that nice flat area, and just put it in vertically like this, right in that area. This is a piece of Paduk, any type of exotic, Cocobolo, Red Heart, Purple Heart, what have you. And then you can also run it lightly across your texturing, just enough to pick up a little bit of coloring highlight. And that'll add another little dimension to that texture. So that's how that works. Now we're going to do something very similar with a large texturing wheel, except I'm going to be a little more aggressive in turning the angle. And I like to go from low to high, and again we're always aiming in the direction of the lower wheel whenever possible, although we can move back and forth. And I need to slow this down a little bit, between about 400 and 600. And my left hand is firmly pressing down on the tool rest, so we're going to have this angled at close to 45 degrees. I can tell it's a little too aggressive. It's chewing up a lot of wood, but I like the effect. And again, picking it up and putting it in will try causing more random texturing patterns. And you can see what an interesting cut we've got there. Generally, when I do doing this on a bowl, rather than use the 1/4-inch pyramid tool, I like to use a spear point scraper and pick up speed just a little bit, closer to 1,000. And let's just put a little mark here. Let's put a little mark here. Let's put a little mark here. And of course you could put beads or whatever, and always again separate it with some type of visual, either a V-groove, a burn mark, exotic, or a little bead. Let me show you a few references that are available for download from my blog site, and you can click on the little information circle up the top of the upper right hand corner, and that will link you to my website. And then just go to resources and you can download these. Here's an article I wrote on texturing and spiraling for the American Woodturner back in December 2013. I've also got a downloadable article on how I made the rotary texturing tool. That is the Decorating Elf knockoff, including a parts list and options for where the parts come from. You'll also find a handout on adding pizzazz with spiraling and texturing that gives you some of the highlights of some of the things that I've covered that hopefully will be useful to you. In closing, we've showed you how to use we've compared and contrasted the small and large texturing tools, spiraling and texturing tools, and we've showed you how to use them and some techniques for making them pop. In the next episode I'm going to show next week, I'm going to show you how to use the rotary tool that uses a Dremel burr, commercially known as the Decorating Elf by Henry Taylor. But first, let me ask you a question. Do you belong to a wood turning club? If not, I urge you to do so. But if you do, please share a link to this video with your editor. Editors are normally always looking for some material to put in the newsletter, and that'll help me out. Thanks.